If you're thinking about doing any subject to transactions, there are at least eight people you should have involved in that deal. And let me explain to you who those 8 people are and why you should have these 8 people. Number one, you should have a seasoned real estate investor involved, because if you have never done a subject to transaction, an owner financing transaction, a creative real estate transaction, yes, there are other people that you need, but you need to have a seasoned real estate investor. A lot of new, amateur, not too experienced real estate investors, they want to eat so much of the pie that they're unwilling to give a little bit up just to have a seasoned real estate investor involved. Now, of course, this could be a mentor, it could be a teacher, it could be a partner, or it could just be someone that you come into contact with and you ask them to come in, and don't be afraid to let them get in on the deal, because it will be way worth the time and the money that they put in for you to learn what you're going to learn when you have somebody that's seasoned, okay? So a seasoned real estate investor, number one. Number two, a closing attorney / title company. You can get both sometimes depending on what state you're in. I'm in the state of Georgia. I'm fortunate to have a couple closing attorneys who are extremely well-rounded and experienced in creative real estate investing. One in particular that I work with like 95% of the time, but like they have an extraordinary team. They have title companies that they work with. Like everything is such an amazing experience that even when I don't know stuff, I don't care, because I know they know a whole lot more than I know, and that gives me the comfort and security. And so you have to have that, even if, because this is the mistake that a lot of people make, especially in social media, even if you've bought contracts and paperwork for these types of deals from people on the internet, you still need your attorney locally to vet it, because you don't know what the laws are. And depending on what type of subject to transactions you're doing, if they're pre-foreclosures, if they're tied to liens and other distress situations, you got to know what the laws are concerning those types of deals that you're in. And you want to make sure that that paperwork is tight. I'm telling you, that's somewhere that you don't want to play with. So I'm definitely going to say a closing attorney and title company. Now, let me also say the reason why I prioritize a real estate investor who's seasoned above a closing attorney is not for legal purposes, it's for practical purposes. Because if you do have a closing attorney and a title company, but you don't have the experience, you don't really know the ins and outs, they're only going to help you with so much. They ain't doing your deal with you. They ain't the investor on the deal with you. They're not going to do a lot of the stuff that you would have a real estate investor who's mentoring you or who's working with you as a partner that will do. So you definitely want to have that. Number three, a real estate agent. Now, this is kind of questionable because some people, they feel like real estate agents are in the way. Well, I'm biased because my wife is a real estate agent and my wife is investor friendly. I mean, of course, she's married to a real estate investor, and my wife knows the ins and outs of the creative side of investing, the conventional side of investing, and a lot of other things that she's very savvy in. She understands the financial side. She understands the lending side. She has amazing relationships with inspectors, appraisers. She has amazing relationships with lenders. Like anybody that's involved in a real estate deal, my wife has a relationship with. So I know, generally speaking, having an agent involved, even if it's not for the purpose of the acquisition of the property, it may be for the purpose of leasing it, renting it, or the disposition of the property. They definitely play a very important role. So I'm going to put a real estate agent at number 3. I'm putting a transaction coordinator, a TC, at 4, only because if you have a really good real estate agent like I do, my wife is my real estate agent, more so for the disposition side, but she's also the TC because she's very detailed. She does the work of a transaction coordinator, and she does an amazing job on the acquisition, and she does it on the disposition. And so I get the best of both worlds. But I separate the two because you may have a real estate agent who may be the person listing it, or maybe if you're acquiring a property that has a real estate agent involved, you may need somebody involved on a real estate agent level, or may not. But all real estate agents are not TCs. Okay, all TCs are not real estate agents. If you can find one that's both, then guess what? You take 3 and 4 and you bundle them together. If not, you want to have a real estate agent, especially for your disposition, and a transaction coordinator will definitely help you when they are investor friendly and creative real estate friendly. So you got to make sure that these agents and TCs that you're working with, that they're well versed in the language and in the logistics of subject to transactions, creative real estate transactions. If not, if they just say, oh, I work with investors, what, conventional investors, traditional investors, that doesn't mean you know the creative, non-traditional way. And you want to make sure that they're clear, okay? Number 5, an insurance agent. The only reason why an insurance agent is number 5 is because if you don't get through this, you never get an insurance. You never need an insurance agent. Meaning that if you don't know how to invest in real estate and do subject to transactions, and you don't have a closing attorney who can help you draft the paperwork, start the title search, if you ain't got an agent or a TC putting the paperwork together, you know, your authorization to release and calling to find out what the payoff is, if you ain't got none of this going on, you don't need an insurance agent. That's the only reason why I put them at number 5. But this insurance agent needs to be a subject to expert. They need to know how to quote you and create you a policy for that subject to property. Okay, so if you're fixing and flipping it, then that means there's a certain policy you're going to need. If you're buying and holding it, is a certain policy you're going to need. But either way, if you're buying it and staying in it and it's a subject to, there's a certain policy that they need to put together for you, because there's some declaration information that they're going to have to send to the bank for that existing loan, and you want to make sure your insurance agent is a subject to expert. If they don't know nothing about subject to, if you ask your insurance agent, hey, I'm working on buying a property, I'm getting all my paperwork together, I want to get a quote, and this is the type of deal it's a subject to, and they're like, subject to, what do you mean? You need to find another one, okay? Number 6, a GC, a general contractor. I would prefer you have a general contractor, especially if you're doing a lot of deals, or if you plan on doing a lot of deals. You need to make sure that your general contractor can, to some extent, assume some role of a project manager, because a GC is different than a subcontractor. Like a subcontractor could be the floor guy, the painter, the roof guy, the electrician, the plumber, okay? But a general contractor who can assume somewhat of a role of a project manager, they come in and they work with these 6 or 7 or 8 different subcontractors to make sure that the project is getting done, it's on time. And if your GC doesn't do that, you need a project manager, especially if you're fixing and flipping properties, because you got to get those properties fixed up, renovated, and back on the market to sell them. Number 7, a home inspector. A home inspector. Of course, your home inspector is going to be needed once you go under contract, right? So once you secure the contract and you start the title search and the pre-closing preliminary due diligence process, you want a home inspector. I recommend that you definitely want to get a home inspection, even if the deal is good. And I'm going to be honest with you, there are times that I haven't, but I know my way around houses. My GC happens to be a former home inspector. And so I have been willing to take some risks sometimes. And sometimes I've gotten caught taking that risk, meaning that, wow, I found out something that I didn't know once we disposed it, or in the dispo, once we fixed it and flipped it, and the new buyer got an inspection. The inspector found things that we didn't know because we didn't get an inspection, but we were willing and ready to take care of whatever we need to take care of. So I would just say across the board, make that, make that a non-negotiable so that you don't get yourself in trouble. And number 8, I would say a mortgage loan originator. They call them a MLO. Now, MLO is really for a couple purposes. Number 1, when I'm working on acquiring a property and I'm looking at my exit strategies, how am I going to exit this? what are the potential exit strategies that I can use even if I don't use them? One of my exit strategies may be a refinance, a cash out. It may be I want to know what that might look like even if I don't cash out. What if I just need to refi because, the due on sale clause is caught or something, and I just want to know how to get out of that situation if I needed to refinance it to exit it. I might talk to my MLO to find out, okay, what does that look like for me? What is the seasoning period? How long will it take for me to hold it until I'm able to get a loan? And what does that loan to value look like? It may also be in my exit or disposition if I do some type of other creative deal. There are people who do wraps. There are people who do contracts for deeds. They do lease options. And depending on where you are, and again, the laws that govern it, you want to talk to the MLO to find out, okay, what do I need to do to pre-qualify this potential tenant buyer or this individual who's purchasing it on a wrap? I need to make sure that I'm operating by the lending practices and the guidelines that govern what I'm doing, because I'm assuming somewhat of a role of a lender. So it's very important for you to have that. So these are just the 8 people you should have involved in a subject to deal. And of course, in any deal, specifically creative deal, but I know these 8 people to be extremely valuable when you are participating in creative real estate investing, more specifically like subject to.